What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at pro ant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this edition of Disguise Coverage, where I've started kind of all over the place, my mic was over here, which is why I sounded far away to start the show. The Buffalo Bills have been eliminated from the playoffs after a loss that it seems like they continue to have. They don't just lose. They have art form type of losses, the type of losses that names are given to and that are placed on lists, and ones that seem to be burned and seared into your brain forever. And following that loss in Denver to the Broncos in overtime in the divisional round, Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott was fired. Buffalo Bills GM Brandon Beane was promoted. And suddenly this Bills organization, team, franchise has kind of been thrust or plunged into chaos. And we're going to talk about that chaos, some of that chaos tonight. We are going to lead off this show talking about the firing of Sean McDermott, the promotion of Brandon Beane. If you're watching the show live right now, we're listening to it, early Wednesday morning. Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula are scheduled to have a press conference Wednesday, the 21st at 10 a.m. So we'll get some more answers there, but we're going to dive into just kind of the firing, of McDermott. How deserved was it? How not deserved was it? The way it was handled, everything tying to Beane, the roster, the on-field stuff, all of that. We're going to have a discussion on that, put a bow on that. Part of the reason I wanted to lead off with that in this episode is because, as a lot of you in the comments and chat are already kind of putting through, we like to make this show very engaging. The brand in general, but especially on the show, I like to make it as engaging as possible. And I know a lot of you have thoughts, questions, comments, concerns. So we'll lead off with that, put a bow on it, put it to rest as much as we can, even though it will not be put to rest for likely a very long time. And then after that, we're going to dive into several head coaching candidates that appear to be on the Buffalo Bills radar that also I think would make sense, that I like, pros, cons, ranking them, what they bring schematically, what they bring from a philosophical or from an identity perspective, who they kind of are as people and some of their journeys and steps. So I think this will be a fun episode, even though it's painful, because football is pain, sports are pain. As the comment just came in now from Fireplace on MC, top 3 head coach wish list. We're going to get into that in this episode. I'm going to be detailing several guys that, are out there that I think make sense, that are potentially, rumored to be on the Bills' radar. After Sean McDermott was fired, it was reported that the Bills were starting to put together head coaching candidate lists yesterday. So it's just a very interesting way that things are going about. But yeah, we're going to talk about the head coaching spot. To the comment that just came in, yes, we're going to talk about for a lot of these, right? Head coach that comes in, who would be the defensive coordinator, who would kind of be the offensive coordinator. If it's a defensive-minded guy, are they calling plays? If it's an offensive-minded guy, are they calling the plays? So you don't really need an OC or a DC, depending on what side of the ball they're on, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll be diving into that for a bunch of these candidates. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything from anyone that you have on your mind. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, beliefs, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, theorems, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be diving into a bunch of that to start the show and go through. And we'll throw up the banner now that says Sean McDermott fired, Brandon Beane promoted. Also, I just saw as we started, my wife texted me, shout out to my wife, and I saw somebody mention in the comments as well. Mike McDaniel just got hired as the Chargers offensive coordinator, which I think is a good hire for them. And I'm trying to somebody already updated his Wikipedia page. That's crazy. Mike McDaniel just got hired as the Chargers offensive coordinator. So if you were a Mike McDaniel truther, wanted him to come to the Bills as an offensive coordinator, as I did, but I didn't think it was likely. I actually thought he would kind of push for another head coaching job. So it's interesting that he's going to be an OC. I think he's going to do really well with Herbert. I think McDaniel's a good offensive mind, good run game design, which makes sense why he would mesh well with Harbaugh. He just kind of gets away from the run too easily or often. But playing under Jim Harbaugh, I don't think that's going to be a worry because he's a guy who's going to preach, to kind of pound the rock. But good run game design from Mike McDaniel, Shanahan tree, formational manipulation, personnel, dictation, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of what his offense was in Miami was tailored and fit for Tua in terms of, the first read aspect, the timing and the precision of it in that way. But I think he's a good offensive mind, really good at the details, good at coaching up the wide receiver room. Again, just design, calling, layering. I think he's a good mind. He's somebody that I would have took here in Buffalo. If, I wasn't expecting Sean McDermott to get fired. One of the snares I kept preaching was if Joe Brady were to take a job elsewhere or if Joe Brady were to be let go, I would welcome Mike McDaniel with open arms as the Bills offensive coordinator. But alas, another one, potential head coach, potential offensive coordinator off the board. If you were a believer in Robert Saleh, as I am a bit, he was hired late last night / early this morning to be the head coach for the Tennessee Titans. So we'll kind of see what happens going down the road as, again, more names continue to fall off. Jeff Hafley, Packers defensive coordinator, who I really like. In terms of how creative he is schematically, he was hired, I believe, officially or heavily reported as the Dolphins head coach yesterday. So another name off the board. Guys are starting to drop and fall a little bit. We'll continue to see what they say. Again, as Michael says in the chat here, that's such a sharp hire for the Chargers. It really is. I feel like Herbert hasn't gotten a lot of support throughout his tenure with the Chargers and just everything that's been going on. And now you go into next year with, in theory, a healthy offensive line, which when healthy is good. You get Rashawn Slater back. You get Joe Alt back. Those are huge steps forward and kind of having two strong bookends there. And now you have Mike McDaniel calling plays and designing your offense. Man, I think that is a sharp hire. I think that's a good move for the Chargers, who just seem they're kind of in, like, obviously a couple steps back from the Bills, or who knows, maybe not anymore. The Chargers always seem to just kind of charger themselves every year. It feels like there's hype that they don't really, the brass ring they don't grab, the hump they never can get over, but kind of to a lower level than the Bills. So it's funny kind of just watching them pitter patter and like sputter around a bit. But I think they're a good squad. They got good dudes. They got horses on the offensive side. They got some horses on the defensive side. I am one of those people who thinks Justin Herbert is sweet. And yeah, now you got a really good offensive mind in that building. We'll see what happens with Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator on that side of the ball. We'll be talking about him in tonight's episode, but if he were to stay, wow, McDaniel on one side, Minter on the other, really fun and cool stuff. I'm going to go back to the comments at the beginning. And as this banner is up here now saying Sean McDermott fired, Brandon Beane promoted, how does everybody feel about this? Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Do you think the firing was justified? Do you think it was justified, but they didn't go about it the right way? How do you feel about Brandon Beane? How do you feel about the roster? Do you think one of these two guys deserves more blame for the Bills' failures year after year than the other, and why? Whatever you got, put it up into the chat. As always, super chats get priority. And yeah, we're going to go through as many things as we can in tonight's episode. I know there's a lot of thoughts on everyone's minds, so we'll kind of dive into it. But no, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. Marty says, how much dumping on Beane is on the schedule for tonight? Because I'm ready to listen to all of it. Fair. RJ, no, too far, RJ. RJ says, so are we the Cleveland Browns now? Because it feels like we're the Cleveland Browns. No, the Bills aren't there yet. Damn. Marty said they have a good defense, though. Kay Morey says, who do I fire now? I know. Great comment here from Jason. On tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we discussed which is better, to be admired or to be an admiral. I do want to touch on that briefly. And, the Bills ended up posting, I didn't watch it yet. I think it dropped a little bit ago as I was kind of preparing for the episode and finishing daytime stuff. But I saw that they gave like a nice farewell from the Bills Twitter account to Sean McDermott. But, in kind of relation to Jason's tweet there, just the optics of the firing of Sean McDermott were so bad. Like that letter, that press release, I should say, and it not being proofread and them trying to say has done an admirable job, but instead they said admiral. The fact that didn't get checked, and I understand that people kind of make errors. Somebody makes a typo and doesn't catch it, but did nobody else proofread it? and no one else was able to catch it, or did nobody care enough to proofread it and they were just like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. I thought that really was such a good microcosm of kind of the optics of the day yesterday for the firing and for the Bills organization, where it was just, the news was kind of shocking, but the way it seemingly all went down, especially with that press release. Yeah, and again, if you don't know, the first line of the press release from Terry Pegula from the Bills about, hey, Brandon Beane is getting promoted. Sean McDermott is no longer with us. The first line was, Sean has done an admirable, or it meant to say Sean has done an admirable job, but instead of admirable, they wrote admiral. Not great. Marty says, is everyone kind of in the fire? Both of them camp. So this was my thought. And I'm going to leave with this. I'm going to keep going back to the comments. I kind of want to put it out there rather than kind of beating around the bush too much. I think Sean McDermott is at fault for a lot of things. Again, the idea for this Bills team, right, was to win a Super Bowl. Year after year, they've been championship contenders. You want to win your division, right? You want to get a high seed. You want to make the playoffs with the goal of winning a Super Bowl, or at least getting there. The Bills did not. The Bills have been to the AFC Championship multiple times. They faltered multiple times. This year, no Kansas City Chiefs, no Baltimore Ravens, no Joe Burrow, even though really much the big bad in the AFC for you has been the Chiefs. And, it was kind of like, okay, like, can they do it? If not now, when? It was being painted that way by some of the fan base, but a lot of that from the national media. However you slice it, the Bills have failed to get over the hump. They failed in the McDermott Beane era to accomplish the goals that they set out and that the fan base came to expect, which was win a Super Bowl. Or I think even some, like, just get there, like, finally win the AFC, get out of the AFC. And I think tied within that, it wasn't just the, coming up short season after season. It was the similar ways in which they would come up short, where the defense just kind of looks messy and ugly. Guys are banged up. The defensive line looks toothless. Like, there's no pressure. There's no pass rush. There's moments where it just seems like you're getting out coached or you're getting taken advantage of. The teams that you're playing seem to have really good dudes on each side of the ball, like all pro caliber guys and horses. And you just kind of have Josh Allen and not much else. It seems like year after year, they were in the same spot of how they would lose, the reasons for losing, and kind of just not being able to get over that hump, right? And within that, as I've said for a couple seasons, I was fine if Sean McDermott went. I was fine if Sean McDermott stayed. I do not think the grass is always greener on the other side. I thought if you fired Sean McDermott, you could get somebody who capitalizes on Josh Allen and builds the rest of the roster or does something great schematically and get you over the hump. Or you could plunge yourself into horribly terrible depths and be worse than you've been for the past couple years. And I just thought it was, there was an equal chance of having both, right? Especially if you get a head coach that is, more of a coordinator and unproven. Even if you get someone who is proven, has a track record, you still don't know what you're going to get with them, in your building, with your team and these players, so on and so forth. But, if you wanted McDermott gone, I was fine with it. If you wanted McDermott to stay, I was fine with it. I just didn't think the grass was always green on the other side. And on the whole, I thought he was a good coach and a guy running the ship. Although if you watch the show, I've had a lot of issues with just kind of the schematic stuff defensively in the playoffs, what they've been from a reactionary standpoint versus a proactive play on the front foot type of standpoint. And then my issues with the run defense and how they built this roster on that side of the ball, kind of just behind the trends, behind the meta, and how that's cost them and what that's done for them from a negative standpoint. But for as much of their, the failures and shortcomings for this team fall on Sean McDermott, I think there's just as many that fall on Brandon Beane. Brandon Beane's hands are bloody, just like Sean McDermott's hands are bloody. Both of these guys are extremely culpable. And my issue with how this all went down was, I thought if you fired Sean McDermott, okay, then you probably fire Beane, clean house all at once and kind of go from there. And instead, McDermott gets fired, Beane stays on, Beane gets a promotion. Now, as a lot of people have said, and we alluded to on the emergency pod yesterday here on Cover One, like we talked about, this could be Beane gets promoted to president of football operations, someone else takes over as the GM, right? My issue with that is still, if Beane is overseeing everything and everything is funneling into Beane, which is what will happen now in that press release, He got promoted to president of football operations. He'll have oversight of the coaching staff and the day-to-day. So, a new GM is going to report to him. The head coach and the coaching staff will report to him. Like, it all goes, he's at the top of the pyramid. Like, Brandon Beane is running the show right now. And my issue with that is again, for the shortcomings of this team, I thought Brandon Beane was very culpable and had a lot of blood on his hands, just like Sean McDermott did. More reports have come out in the past couple of days of them, each reporting to Pegula and each having decision-making power and so on and so forth. But I kind of always just assumed that. I thought they were in lockstep for a lot of years. We started to see some breadcrumbs a little bit that showed that they might not be. But when it came to building this team and building this roster, on the field stuff, yes, Sean McDermott is coaching this team, developing or not developing this team, schematically running this team, making the in-game decisions, all of that. But when it came to building this team, from an identity standpoint, roster standpoint, philosophy standpoint, you got a bunch of Beane and you got a bunch of McDermott. And I thought they were just both culpable and each had blood on their hands in the failures of this team. And jettisoning Sean McDermott while leaving Brandon Beane, to me, makes it appear like, no, McDermott was at fault for everything. All the bad stuff was because of McDermott. Beane is fine. And who knows? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe all the bad roster moves, all the bad things that have plagued this team from a roster construction standpoint, maybe they were all Sean McDermott. Maybe Beane's hands are clean. They're not, but who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe Beane has wanted to move in a different direction schematically with the defense, but McDermott wanted to hold true to what they've been. And so that's why we saw the players that were brought in for both of them kind of in that regard, or for the defense and offensively, all of that. I just think it's hard to parse who's responsible for what. There was a lot of collaboration. I think there was a lot of like-mindedness between the two. Obviously, that kind of, they each went their separate ways, literally and figuratively, as the season kind of went on. But I think for as many shortcomings as Sean McDermott has had, and he does have them, I'm not here to say Sean McDermott was innocent and he shouldn't have gotten fired. But I just think the optics of it are bad, especially considering how much conversation was had this year specifically on the roster, talent or not having talent, the receiver question, how prickly Beane was, on the radio when it came to the receiver room, and then how much of a problem the receiver room kind of was as the season went on, and how we just bristled at that notion and how that looked. I just think the optics of it are all bad, and I do think there is something to be said for, if you want to keep Beane on, kind of like how they kept Whaley on when McDermott took over, do you want to keep somebody on to have that consistency? And then it was like, okay, maybe they'll let Beane go after the draft, but no, he's getting a promotion. Sean McDermott's out. I just think the optics of it are bad. From the outside, they look bad. I think from within the fan base, they look bad. National media wise, they look bad. It all just really kind of comes out as, Brandon Beane having Terry Pegula's ear, whispering in that ear, like the Lord of the Rings meme for the dude who King. Oh, I should know this. Theoden, I think, whatever, when he's essentially kind of like a shell of himself and Wormtongue or whatever is in his ear, like whispering and like kind of controlling him and doing all that stuff. It kind of comes across like that, as if like Beane is up in the box with Terry Pegula during a Bills game and something bad happens on the field and Beane leans over and is like, see, that's why I didn't want that guy. Sean wanted that guy. That guy that just dropped that pass, I didn't want that guy. Sean wanted that guy, but I was trying to be nice to Sean and kind of give him what he wanted. And look at that guy drop that pass. That's a Sean McDermott guy. If somebody missed a tackle, Terry would be like, oh, how come that guy missed the tackle? And Beane would be like, that's because that's a Sean McDermott guy. That's why I didn't want that guy. I wanted somebody else, but Sean wanted that guy. It just, the optics of it are just really ugly, really bad. And then you pair that with the press release and more reports coming from, the players being super shocked and not liking how it went down, different reports coming from the local media. And there's just, optically, it's just bad. It's ugly. And I feel like Sean McDermott, bears a lot of the blame for this team not getting over the hump, but I also feel like Brandon Beane does as well. And that's my biggest thing with all of them. My issue isn't necessarily Sean McDermott being fired. It's McDermott being fired, Beane staying, and Beane getting promoted. Because I just felt like they were both, you could say equal, you could say one over the other, but they were both extremely culpable when it came to this team's shortcomings. Both had a lot of blood on their hands, and it just, optically, I just don't think this looks good, and I don't like it. just with how it's kind of playing out. And again, even if, Beane is going to really be, more of a true president overseeing everything, right? And there's going to be a new GM, whether it's Terrence Gray, Brian Gaine, internal, or somebody else. But if it's internal, they're probably going to share a lot of Beane's vision. Beane is still going to be in charge of everything at the end of the day. They're still reporting to Beane. So this team is really going to take on Brandon Beane's vision and Brandon Beane's wants and desires. And then a new head coach that comes in is going to have to be in lockstep with Beane and or is reporting to Beane. So like, what does that dynamic look like? Do coaches who are potentially coming in and interviewing not like that dynamic? Do they not want to report to Beane in that way? If they have a different vision, who knows? Maybe, for as much as people like Klint Kubiak, maybe he and Brandon Beane are just opposed in certain areas. And so Klint Kubiak is like, no, thank you. Like, I'm going to turn this down. I don't want to have to report to that guy. Or I just don't think we click and vibe and see things in the same light. It just all kind of stacks and compels. And again, time will tell for everything, right? Time will really tell how much of the problem was Sean McDermott, how much of the problem was Brandon Beane. Can a new coach fix everything? Was it certain players that were the problem? How much turnover will we see with this roster? How much churn will there be? Do they start to move in new directions? And even then you could still play devil's advocate and be like, well, maybe Beane is just doing this to placate the fans and make it seem like this and that. There's just, at the end of the day, it's just a lot of drama, a lot of poor optics, a lot of messiness and muddiness and murkiness, and a lot of things that I don't think contribute positively to a team and an organization that are trying to get to a Super Bowl. And again, who knows? Time will tell. Maybe this will be better for 2026. Maybe it'll be better in the long run. Maybe this is the wound that had to be cleaned out so this team could move forward. Time will tell. It's just, I just think Brandon Beane deserves a good chunk of blame, just like Sean McDermott deserves a good chunk of blame. And just the way it went down, how McDermott got fired, how the organization responded. I just didn't like the optics of it as a person. I just think, again, whether you wanted Sean McDermott fired or not, I don't think a person should be treated that way or have such a poor initial send off. Especially one who has done so much for this team. Again, team didn't win the Super Bowl, didn't accomplish what they wanted to. Sean McDermott completely turned this team around from a culture standpoint, from an identity standpoint, from a free agent destination standpoint, to a veteran trying to win a chip type of standpoint, to rookies coming in and wanting to come to play in Buffalo. He did a lot, and I think he deserved a better send-off. I think he deserved a better way out, from a large-scale perspective, but and then just from logistically how this team was built, I think he and Beane both had bloody hands in this regard. But teach their own. Let's go forward and see a bunch of comments as we go through. Gage says, I'm so ready for a schematic change on defense. Me too. We have no capital in the draft or cap, so I doubt it, but I'd love a hybrid or 3-4 scheme. Lord, please give me bend on the edge. I feel like this comment was written for me. I don't think there's any one right way to build a defense, but regular listeners of the show do know that, I'm more of a 3-4 guy. I'm more of a hybrid defense type of dude. I do like bend on the edge and athleticism on the edge, and we'll see. I think that's an interesting part with several of the head coaching candidates we're going to get into this episode with is who they are schematically and philosophy and how that does or doesn't jive with the current roster players they have and what the Bills have been in the past. And I think that's an interesting kind of inflection point potentially. But yeah, I wanted a schematic change for years. And we don't have a ton of capital or cap space. We can make some cap space. There are guys who could be cut, moved, extended, all those things. We'll get into that throughout the offseason here on the show. But yeah, we'll kind of see. Good comment here from Forest of Sleep saying, I don't know how Beane wins the room back. I think that's a fair comment, especially with, again, how everything looks optically right now. It just seems, you've got people out there putting memes of like Brandon Beane and it says like snake behind him. Like that's how it comes across to the public at this point. And yeah, it's tough. Perception is reality. And I feel that. I think that's a very poignant comment. Marty saying, do we know the players are mad versus upset? I think the players are more shocked and or upset at how everything went down with how McDermott was let go and the process of and how things kind of played out. I don't know how you define mad versus upset. I think they're not pleased with how he was let go. I'll put it that way. Okay, Maury says, I think a lot of people are forgetting about a lot of the good that Beane has done over his time. The last 1 to 2 years have really hurt his public image, but what preceded that was really good. Yeah, I've never been um, super on that train that Beane has done a horrible job. He's had a bunch of misses, but everybody kind of has a bunch of misses. I would have liked more impact players on this roster at a certain point, but I think he and Sean McDermott have done a really good job creating a high floor type of team. Now, they necessarily haven't had the high ceiling guys. They haven't had those A tier, S tier type of guys, but I think they've done a pretty good job putting together a roster of B minus to B, maybe some B plus type of guys here and there. And my whole thing, again, isn't saying that Beane has done a horrible job. I do think there have been a lot of questionable moves by Beane, just like I think there's been a lot of questionable moves from McDermott. My whole frustration with this situation was more of, again, I think they're equally culpable in the failures of this team, or close to being. Not even if you don't think it's equal, they're both significantly culpable when it comes to the failures of this team, or this team coming up short. And getting rid of one and not getting rid of the other, to me, just doesn't seem right. Considering, again, how culpable, how significantly culpable they each are. But yeah, I think Beane has done some good, just like he's done some bad, which you can make that case for a lot of GMs. Nobody has 100% hit rate anywhere for anything. RJ saying tomorrow's presser will be the most listened to presser in the history of sports. Yeah, I'm already trying to figure out my work day and what I can do to kind of get out of some things. Fireplace on MC. We are going to talk about that. My top 3 head coach wish list. We're going to get into that. Don't do this, K. Maury. K. Maury says Belichick, Gruden, and Tomlin, right? Just kidding. No. Claude says, I spent all Sunday avoiding media. I've spent a lot of time avoiding everything. I still haven't even finished the tape. I haven't wanted to watch the tape. I've just been going to bits and pieces here and there in different moments. Yeah, I really haven't wanted to do anything. I don't even want to watch the game Sunday. Everything that's going on, it all sucks. Question here. Is Josh required to do an end of season meeting with the media? I don't know if required is the right word, or I can say required, but he usually does something. He has been very quiet. We'll see. I think at some point he needs to say something, just because of his status on the team and who he is and what he is. Got our first Klint Kubiak mention here. Jeffrey says 1 Shanahan trade, 2 Bruce Arians, 3 Davis Webb. Oh, Shanahan trade is interesting. Gage says, give me Shula. We're going to talk about Shula in this episode. RJ saying, I think the correct move was either fire Beane or fire Beane and McDermott. This was the worst option, where the untalented snake is still here. It's like we lost the culture and still have a bad GM. Fair point. I'm already saying Shanahan would be interesting if he wouldn't probably require first. I would take Kyle Shanahan in a heartbeat. I don't want to have to give up picks for a coach, but I really do value Kyle Shanahan a lot. Eric saying Klint with Aiden. I always mispronounce Dirt A's or Dird's like last name. But yeah, so Klint Kubiak essentially with the Seahawks defensive coordinator, and then saying Carl Scott or Jim Schwartz is a name. People, a lot have been bringing that up, his name up a lot. K. Maury saying Mike McDaniel doing better with Herbert than Tua will be a huge FU to the Miami organization. Yes. Jason saying wait until McDaniel finds out how slow Herbert's feet and movements are. Yeah, but his eyes are fast, his processing is fast, and he got a cannon. Cannon. Bill saying everything is on Beane now. He has no more scapegoats. His drafts and free agent signings have been poor at best. He better hit on this or the Mafia is going to be out of their minds. Fair point. Also, and again, that's part of the optics too. Like, I feel like you put yourself more under the microscope, because I don't think this is a move that, and again, I don't know how they thought it was going to be perceived, but if they thought like, okay, we'll let go of Sean McDermott, and people think like, oh, okay, he must have been the problem. And if anything, it's been like a complete 180. Like, you've almost galvanized everybody behind McDermott because you fired McDermott and kept Beane. Yeah. Jose saying, are we ever going to win a Super Bowl? I need hope, but I just don't have hope anymore. I don't know, man. I just want hope too. I just want one before I die. That's it. Not to get too dramatic or anything. I just want one before I die. I want to share a Super Bowl with the older adults in my family that I grew up watching the Bills with as a little kid. You never know. Life is, again, not to get too deep or anything, but life is so fleeting, and you never know what can happen with anyone. And not even the older adults, like the people that my family and friends and loved ones who are Bills fans, I want to share in that and experience that. And you never know when your last day on earth could be. And I want a Bills Super Bowl so bad as a Bills fan. I'm a bigger football fan than I am a Bills fan. And so I can still find things to appreciate in the game, even when the Bills lose or when the Bills come up short. And I enjoy the free agent process and the evaluation process of college football and all of that. But yeah, I want a Bills Super Bowl so bad, man. And I don't know. I did. This was another one. The Bills lost again, not to get too off the rails. The Bills lost to Denver, and I just kind of stared into the void, like just staring at the wall. I just felt so empty again. In a way that I hadn't in a while. 13 seconds kind of killed a lot of my fandom and crushed my soul and spirit. This one also kind of got me a bit. Just all the turnovers, the way it ended. Yeah, just bleh, 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 bleh. Let's go through. RJ saying that division of the AFC West is going to be an absolute nightmare next year to face. I bet we win against Las Vegas, and that's it. Yeah, watch Las Vegas get like Sean McDermott and Fernando Mendoza, and then go on a run or something crazy. Michael saying this might. Oh, another Shanahan comment. This might be wild, but what are the chances Shanahan could be available with the Niners? They have an aging roster. 1 year left. His dad always got Elway. His dad got Elway. Kyle could get it for Josh. He would get the respect. I just don't think the Niners are going to part ways with Shanahan, especially with all the injuries this team had this past year, and they still managed to be a Final Four team into the NFC. Yeah, I know it's tough. Joey saying that Minter would be his top choice. We're going to talk about Mr. Jesse Minter. I always want to say Mike Minter, the former safety for the Panthers, but that is not right. Fair comment here from Wiley saying, I don't think we know enough just yet as for the inside politics. That's fair. There are a lot of even with things being reported, there's still a lot of inner workings that we don't know, which will be interesting to kind of see what happens at the presser tomorrow. Oh, Caleb saying, I really like Brian Flores. Would love him on the cast, even if it's just a coordinator position. Man, I love his attack style, the defense, and the quarters pressures and everything he does. That would be kind of cool. But I think I don't know. I feel like people are wary of him because of how his tenure ended in Miami and just everything that kind of came about after it. But I said it maybe a month or so ago. I would not be opposed to Flores. I just don't think it's likely, but I would not be opposed to Flores. Jeremy saying Beane saved his job by getting rid of McDermott. Now Beane's head and ego will only get bigger. Fair. Yeah, I do think he kind of politicked it a bit and was doing the whispering in the ear to kind of buddy up to Pagula and kind of save himself, which is what it is. Daniel saying Beane deserved more blame, especially this season. Bob, more of the way it happened. I thought a change was needed, but the process left a lot to be desired. Being promoted just reeks. I think it's a very succinct way to put it. Yeah, I'm not completely upset that McDermott got fired. I'm more just the way it went down and Beane staying and all that kind of stuff. Oh, hey, Ant, would we be as mad as we are today about McDermott if he was let go last year? I don't know. Again, I think a lot of the feelings of people being mad isn't really because of McDermott being let go. It's how he was let go and Beane staying. I think that's the big point. I don't think a lot of people are up in arms like, oh, McDermott was an amazing coach. Maybe they are a little bit because of the emotion of how frustrated they are, but I think it's more of how he was let go and Beane staying and the optics of it all more than anything. But that's a really good question though. That's a really good question. Comment here. I hated that Beane stays. He gave McD a bucket of rusty screws and strip nuts. Like, if we bring in a good OC as a head coach, what will he have to work with? I think Beane's ego is an issue. Marty saying, I don't mind that people got fired. I just don't understand how Beane survived. Also, their responses took too long. Oh, another comment here. I think it's a lot more likely that the Bills do worse than McDermott than better. And then a shoulder shrug emoji. Yeah, you never know what you get on the other side. You get a new head coach. You could be immensely better. You could be a tiny bit better. You could be even. You could be worse. You could be way worse. Never know. Life is like a box of chocolates. Yeah, comment from Forrest Asleep. The tribute seemed a day late, $1 short. Yeah, Cameron saying the best guy on the market is McDermott. Just go get him. Oh, good line from Bob. Bob saying admirable is for a 50-50 coach, not a coach who rebuilt the culture. Jason saying it's not a championship roster like Beane claims. I am very concerned about Beane being in charge of football operations. That's fair. Will saying the interesting thing has been the silence on what Allen thinks of this. No leaks of either he hated it or this is what he wanted. Complete silence. I would imagine they checked with him. I don't know. I don't try to speculate too much on that kind of stuff. Like, or kind of, it's so muddy. But I would imagine they checked with him. I would think. Maybe not. I don't know. Comment saying, listening to the Fire McDermott crowd now completely melt down is funny to me. RJ saying they should have came out today and apologized for how it was all handled. They didn't do that. Yeah, in this comment here, seriously so embarrassing. I'm just joining, but the fact that they didn't post McDermott's note either. Yeah, the fact that I think Tom Pelissero posted it. That's where I quote tweeted it from. And yeah, it wasn't on the Bills official page. Really unfortunate. Yeah, Jeremy saying 9 years and McDermott for that flaky letter. What a slap in the face. Yeah. Comment here. Is it not a little scary knowing who's guiding the ship as the Patriots are Super Bowl bound? I don't even want to open that door, but yeah. Claude saying McD was consistently outcoached, so he could have been fired at any point after 13 seconds. But if he's gone, Beane should definitely be gone. He failed the cap, draft, and free agency. He failed Josh and McDermott. Very succinctly put. I think that is a very fair comment, and kind of where my mind is at as well. Like, McDermott could have been gone at any point. I do think he got out coached in a bunch of ways or didn't kind of mitigate things as much as he could have at times. But yeah, if he's gone, Beane should also be gone. And especially this season, having this season to be the one where I felt like they had a lot of injuries and cobbled stuff together, and McDermott still managed to do some good things, even though he still had some bad things like always. Again, it's such a messy ball, but I think that's fair. It's a fair way to kind of put it all. Charles saying, yeah, with Beane getting promoted, does he name a GM? If so, Terrence Gray had some overlap with Kubiak in Minnesota. Yeah, we talked about that on the show yesterday. I do think it's going to end up being my thoughts. Beane is president of football operations, and then after the draft, it becomes official where Terrence Gray or Brian Gain or somebody is named the GM. But then again, like, are they really the GM? Is it more just a shadow position, and they're really just doing the bidding of Beane, and Beane is still pulling the strings and running the show? That's my bigger thing. Like, if it's an internal hire, especially one that was brought in by Beane and developed under Beane and spent a lot of time with Beane, it's still Brandon Beane. 1, because he's still here. 2, he's still the big boss who the GM is reporting to. 3, it's still a guy from his tree. So it's still Brandon Beane. Even if they bring in another GM and it's internal, or they name a GM and it's internal, to me, it's still Brandon Beane. Daniel saying, how do you put together the Bills' weak bottom 5 wide receiver group and once again have a D-line with almost no pass rush and bad against the run and get a promotion? Get a promotion is in all caps. No offensive weapons, no defensive weapons. And yeah, and then it was funny too to see the report from Ian Rappaport on NFL Network yesterday where he was talking about, like, oh, McDermott, was done well, but it's time for him to go. He mentioned how this Bills team with so many weapons and how teams around the league view them as being stocked full of talent. And it was like, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Let's go. Oh, nice. Bob says the Sabres are up 4-0. That's very good to know. I'm recording that game, so I'm excited to go and watch that. That's nice, too. They're going to put up all the goals that they can. Gage saying, God, please give me an outside linebacker and get to the QB in the playoffs. I am scrolling through comments as we are going through. Wow, I appreciate everyone. I appreciate everybody for being in here. And if you're willing and able, please and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Likes go a long way. But I'm also kind of saying that as I scroll through and read, because I'm looking, it's 9:42 real time. I'm at 9:20 in the comments. So it's awesome how many people we have in here live, over 400 people. That's super cool. And all the comments are coming through. Like, I really wish I could just sit and read every single one. Apologies if I don't. There's so many comments. Everybody's crushing it tonight. I appreciate everyone. William coming through. Worm tongue and Theoden. Oh, okay, I was right. Theoden. Okay, cool. King Theoden. Yep. All right, cool. I was there. And it was Worm tongue. All right, cool. But yeah, now I'm at 9:22 in the comments. So I'm trying. There's a lot of comments. You guys are absolutely crushing it. Guys and girls, whoever's there. In all fairness with this one, so this comment, Von Miller was the death blow. He was supposed to get us over the 13-second hump. In all fairness with that, I think Von Miller did deliver. He just tore his ACL. Like, I thought that was a good signing. He was every bit the closer he was supposed to be. He just got hurt, which is unfortunate. Yeah, comment here. Are you superstitious about predicting a head coach, like giving a score prediction? Do you think not getting over the hump is 50-50 McBeane, or one is more to blame? I am superstitious about predicting a head coach, like a score prediction. Thank you very much for knowing me. Do I think not getting over the hump is 50-50? For me, it's tough because I don't know how much of the roster construction and roster building was Beane or McDermott or both in conjunction with one another. Like, I don't know how much Keon Coleman, for example. Did both of them think that was a great pick, or did Beane think it was great, or did McDermott think it was great? Like, which moves did each one pound the table for? Which moves did they both pound the table for? How much was McDermott involved in any kind of extension moves or free agent dollars and cap structure? You would think that most of that is all Beane. How much did they really talk? Obviously there's overlap. Obviously there's collaboration. And that's my whole thing. Like, it's so muddy. Both of their hands are bloody. They're both culpable. I think not getting over the hump for me, just because I have questions about the roster and the on-field stuff, both, I think it's 50-50. Just based off of what I believe their roles and relationship to be, equally having successes, equally having failures, shortcomings. I think maybe you could push it to 55-45 one way or the other, and I wouldn't fight you. You could devil's advocate that a good chunk, but I think it's pretty close to 50-50, which again is where a lot of my frustration comes from, because even if it's 55-45, that's still pretty close. Even if it's 60-40 again, and I don't think it goes past 60-40. Like, that's at the highest, whether you think it's 60-40 McDermott or 60-40 Beane. That's at the high end of it for me. I just think they're that culpable kind of equally. Yep, Von was doing awesome until he got hurt. Yep. Okay. Wow, man. You guys, everybody's crushing it. All right, so I'm going to scrolling through. I just saw this comment in all caps. I didn't know you can trade picks for a head coach. Yes. Will with cool comment. A Shula Scheelhaase package deal. You read my mind. We're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that. All right, I'm going to start to move into some of these head coaching candidates. If there's something I did not get to, I am now, wow. You have no idea how much I've just been scrolling to finally get to kind of where we are. Oh, and fair comment here from James that just came in. It'll be interesting to see who replaces Aaron Kromer. I keep forgetting Aaron Kromer retired, and he's been a huge part of success for this team. Things are kind of just falling all over. Yeah. Oof. If there's something I did not get to that you commented, feel free to put it up into the chat again. I'll see it as I can get to. Kind of go from there. If there's something you really want to get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. Get at me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. Tweet at me, Blue Sky, post at me, DM me, whatever. Get at me in the Discord if you're a Discord member, if you're one of the insiders for the Cover One stuff. If you, again, there were so many comments. If I feel terrible, but if I went through every single comment, we're going to be here until like 1 a.m., which we kind of could do. But yeah, and again, I appreciate everybody coming in. These comments have been awesome. I just want to sit. Honestly, I shouldn't have even prepared a head coach thing. We should have just had a whole live chat session on the McDermott firing and Beane promotion and gone from there. I like that. There was a comment I wanted to get to from Forrest Asleep. What do you think of the medical reports and how that was handled? I did think this was interesting. I think McDermott said all that stuff funneled into Beane, which was why when he was asked about injury stuff, he was kind of just being like, oh, what I'm told or what I think. Like, he didn't really know. I think that's terrible. Like, he should have an equal hand in that. He should know the injury status and injury report status for his players and for his team. Again, just messy. Thank you very much, Brian, for being here and for your super chat. I'm assuming you, or maybe you just wanted to give out of the kindness of your heart, but maybe you had a question or a thought that went with a super chat. If you did, you don't have to give another super chat. Just put your next comment into the chat and I'll read it, because I'll assume that was the one that was supposed to come with the super chat. Or if you just wanted to give a super chat, I'll take it. And I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Uh, uh, uh. This is a good comment from Jose. Do you think Josh Allen has so much scar tissue when it comes to gut wrenching losses that it's going to affect him heavily the rest of his career in the playoffs? Yes. I think there's something to be said for, and not even just Allen in general. I think there's something to be said for building scar tissue and having wounds and, building calluses, all these kind of proverbials, and how it toughens you and hardens you and gets you experience and all that kind of stuff, right? I do think there's a certain point where it jumps the shark a bit, and then it becomes more of a hindrance than it does like a character building type of moment. I don't know what that is for everybody. It's different for everybody, for teams, for individuals, all that kind of stuff. Oh, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Brian said, nah, just a tip. Just a tip, not that. And a smiley face. I appreciate you, Brian. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think at a certain point, all that scar tissue and all that losing, I think it gets to a point where it's like builds character, builds character, builds character, builds character. And then you start to go down the roller coaster as opposed to keep going up and ascending. At a certain point, it breaks you, I think. To someone else's point, though, who came in and said it? Elway, this comment from Steve. Elway lost multiple Super Bowls and got through it. Steve Young, had a bunch of challenges, takes over from Montana. He has the famous, wins the Super Bowl. And then he's like, take this monkey off my back. He was feeling so much pressure for that franchise. So there is ways to get it done, right? Eventually. But I also think too, just in general, like it's so hard to win a championship in any sport. Like you have to be good and you have to have luck on your side. Like the stars really do have to align for any team to win a Super Bowl and a championship in any sport. And even with this Bills team, not to kind of get to, focus in or hone in on the Broncos game, 5 turnovers, right? Some poor throws and decisions from Allen, right? Giveaways that led directly to points for the Broncos, missed opportunities and capitalizations, multiple, muddy calls from the ref, and they still lost by 3 in overtime. Even with all these things going wrong, even with the roster not having a bunch of studs or dudes on it, even with all the injuries and all the poor performances in games, and as limited as McDermott or Beane might be, or Babbage or Brady or whoever, they barely lost in this game. And I know this isn't like, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. I know that. Like this isn't it's a silver lining type of deal. But think about how all these things went wrong, or not even put in air quotes, did go wrong, and they just barely lost. Like they could easily be in the AFC Championship this week, which is what makes this loss even more painful and more hurtful. You never know. Just takes a couple bounces going your way. But I do think the good teams figure out the way to make the ball bounce in their favor more often than not. But yeah, that Allen piece, who knows? Maybe it scars him too much. Maybe it's something that sticks in his head. And every time he gets into the playoffs, it's in the back of his mind and he presses a little too much. We'll kind of see a little bit. But yeah, I do think it's something that eventually you have so much scar tissue. Eventually you jump the shark and you start to go downhill for it. And it's instead of building character, eventually it kind of guts you. I just think that's just human nature. It's got to. It's hard to just constantly get kicked in the teeth over and over again and keep coming back for more. It's tough. Very tough. All right, now we're going to dive into some head coach candidate stuff. I wanted to, as I say this, I forget. There was if somebody in the chat wants to do me a huge solid, there was multiple people who put out like tweets of like the Bills head coaching odds. Not that necessarily matters like completely, because betting sites are betting sites and individual people are individual people, like whatever. But there's some interesting names on those lists. I was going to reference it a little bit. But the first name we're going to start with here is Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak. Jeremy White of WGR tweeted yesterday something to the tune of, little birdie, who, the same little birdie who told him Sean McDermott was going to get fired. That same little birdie told him like that move was made with Klint Kubiak in mind. So Klint Kubiak, that's one who we're going to lead off with. Someone who I like. I mentioned him early in the season, maybe like Octoberish, in terms of what I like they were doing. And I like this comment here from NE Trail Boss saying, my favorite was Saleh, but that's not happening. I also liked Robert Saleh. I think he got a raw deal in New York. I think he's a good defensive mind. I think he's able to kind of, mold with his players and what's available, but he's gone. So yeah, Klint Kubiak, offensive coordinator, Seattle Seahawks, somebody who has been, the odds are in his favor from the betting sites of being the next potential Bills head coach. I think there's multiple sites with him as like the best betting odds. Again, I'm not putting that out there as like, so that's why I think he's going to be the coach. I just think that's interesting. But yeah, that Jeremy White note I think was really, really, really interesting. For those who don't know, we'll kind of go to his last stops. 2019 to 2020, he was the Vikings QB coach. He was the Vikings offensive coordinator in 2021. He was then the pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Broncos in 2022. The Niners passing game coordinator in 2023. The Saints offensive coordinator in 2024. And then the Seattle Seahawks coordinator here this year in 2025. I watched a ton of Seahawks tape this year, offensively and defensively, because I like what they do offensively and I like what they do defensively. Plus, I like a lot of dudes that they have. I love Kenneth Walker coming out of the draft. JSN obviously is a monster, but Zach Charbonnet is a cool running back. Sucks that he tore his ACL, but they got some cool offensive linemen. And then defensively, just a bunch of dudes in a really cool scheme. So I watched a bunch of Seahawks tape this year, and kind of in October, like it was kind of floated. Somebody on the show was like, oh, who's a name that you would, look out for if Sean McDermott got fired? If you had to pick an offensive guy, I was like, oh, Klint Kubiak would be kind of cool. Young, up and coming offensive mind. Talk about some pros and cons for him. So pros, he comes from that Shanahan offense. I think that's a pro because of how successful it is, how QB friendly it is. And again, very much in that Shanahan mold, which honestly is tied to his dad, Gary Kubiak, working with, Shanahan's dad, Mike Shanahan, and how they were in lockstep with everything. So it's kind of, chicken and egg thing. But Klint Kubiak, Shanahan offense, formational and personnel manipulation and dictating to a defense. So you are using condensed formations, you're using tight ends, fullbacks, all that kind of stuff to kind of force defenses into looks that you want, and then using whatever they do against them. If they don't match the heavies, you're running it down their throat. If they do match the heavies, your heavies are still a bit athletic, and so you could use that to generate some explosives. Jason says, would the Kubiak scheme be good for James Cook? I do think so. Kubiak, Shanahan, all that type of deal, outside zone, tech ties back to the Alex Gibbs, Mike Shanahan days. Everything is outside zone, a lot of zone running. That pairs well with the bootlegs and the play action. I think Kubiak also does a really good job of marrying the run and the pass, as most Shanahan, disciples do. But yeah, James Cook at Georgia was great as a zone runner, and that's really what he was coming out and coming into Buffalo. Him progressing as a gap scheme runner, so all the the blast counter stuff this year, or the tackle pull stuff, that is whether it's tackle wrapping through, or it's the long trap type of stuff where they're kicking out the edge. That's a gap scheme run. Technically, duo is a gap scheme run. It's power without a puller, but it kind of has some zone principles to it from a track perspective. But yeah, I think James Cook would excel in a zone scheme. Think of all those mid-zone runs, mid-zone week where, there's like three guys over here to the right side of the line and they run to the left and Cook bends it back, whether it's a one cut or a two cut, he cuts it all the way back and bends it. Yeah. I think he would be successful in that scheme, 1000%. So yeah, Shanahan, or not Shanahan, Kubiak, well, kind of one of the same. Formational and personnel manipulation and dictation, like I talked about, heavy personnel to generate explosives, going heavy to go play action and take shots down the field, especially on early downs. Outside zone, marrying the run and the pass, building counters off of that outside zone. Again, a lot of times in the forms of play action, marrying the run and the pass, a lot of bootlegs, getting the quarterback on the move. Think of what Kyle Shanahan does with Brock Purdy. Think of what Klint Kubiak has done with Sam Darnold, all the play action stuff, under center, run game, under center play action, marrying those two, getting your quarterback on the move, layered passing concepts, right, to flood zones and create high lows and put defenders in conflict. Good stuff there. The biggest question for me is, he doesn't have head coaching experience. He's been an offensive coordinator 3 times, once in Minnesota, again in 2021, in New Orleans last year in 2024, and then Seattle this past season in 2025. So each time he's been an offensive coordinator, he went somewhere else after. I believe for regime changes each time. So Minnesota, he was from Minnesota as the OC in 2021. Then he's in Denver. He's the Saints OC last year. Now he's in Seattle. So you don't really necessarily know what's he going to be like year after year, building, developing, teaching, how sustainable everything is, right? Can he develop players? Can he build and layer and grow a scheme along with the players and or the players? Also, can he manage a team as a people manager like a coach needs to do? I think that's something that gets lost in the sauce a lot when you think about what a coach is. So much, it's me especially, right? Like I watch a ton of tape and all that stuff. Everything for me is X's and O's, scheme and structure, but there's still like a people manager element to being a head coach, a coordinator in general, position coach as well, but especially a head coach. You have to be a people manager. You got to know your X's and O's, but you also have to be a people manager. And some guys lean one way or the other, right? Some guys are heavy X's and O's and they're so great at it that nothing else matters. Some guys are such great people managers and they let the X's and O's guys take care of everything, or they're able to identify those guys and go from there. But we don't know, can he manage a team? I also just, from the vibes of him, like as where he's been and like what his dad was like too, like, and just in general, we don't know. Is he the type of guy who's like your quote unquote like leader of men? Is he the type of person that commands people's attention? Is he that people leader? Does he have it in him? We don't know. So those are the biggest cons for me. One, just not having a head coaching experience. Two, what does he offer as like a, leader and commander? Two, and then three, yeah, he's at a different stop every year. Like we don't know what year 2 of that Vikings offense would look like, or year 2 of the Saints offense, or, maybe we don't know what year 2 of the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know why I said it like that. What year 2 of the Seahawks offense will look like if he leaves and goes to Buffalo or goes someone else. And as Chris says here, we need someone who's been a head coach before. I think it's a fair point. You, especially now, to right the ship, do you want someone who's shown the ability to right the ship or steer the ship before? Or also kind of playing into that, knowing Beane is running the ship as the president of football operations and everything is funneling up to him, does it make it more likely that you do get a first-time head coach because it's somebody who doesn't necessarily know the ways of the world and is more comfortable? Would Kubiak be more comfortable coming in and taking this job than Robert Saleh would have? Because Saleh's like, you know what? I've done this before. I don't need to report to this guy in this manner. I don't need this type of structure, so on and so forth. Does an unproven guy like Kubiak say, you know what? Yeah, like I would like somebody to kind of oversee everything so I can focus on the X's and O's, so on and so forth. But I think that's a fair point. This comment, Kubiak would be a great admiral. Well done. Well done. Overall, I do like Klint Kubiak. I also want to say this too. I think the Bills go offense with their head coach. I think they go in that vein of the Andy Reid, Zach Taylor, Sean McVay, Shanahan type of deal, where their head coach is the offensive coordinator, is the play caller. Whoever their offensive coordinator is really just kind of funneling into him. I do think they lean offense, whoever they go with in this coaching cycle. I do think they lean offense. I think Kubiak makes a lot of sense for them. I also think from a personnel standpoint, he fits a lot with what they do, especially with what he's done this year. Multiple tight end looks, heavy personnel, under center, I formation type of stuff. Like it would be a pretty seamless transition with the personnel they already have offensively. It wouldn't be something where, you're not really going to see his offense until year 2 or 3 because they have to gut everything that they have and they got to bring in the right body types or the right skill sets. So yeah, I do think they lean offense. I think Kubiak makes a lot of sense with how they're already built. And yeah, I think the Bills kind of, we're seeing that a lot, right? A lot of teams are just going in the offensive mind direction, as they have really for a while in terms of going with that. And again, I do think it makes sense for the Bills because you also think if you're going with a defensive head coach, although I personally like that as well. If you go with the defensive head coach, you're probably thinking, if Allen does his thing and the offense does his thing, your offensive coordinator is probably getting churned out every 2 to 4 years because teams are going to be like, wow, that offense looks great. Let's pluck that guy. And then you constantly have to change the offensive coordinator. Whereas if you have an offensive coordinator head coach who's running the place and running the show on that side of the ball, you don't have to necessarily do that as much. And maybe you don't worry about your defensive coordinator getting plucked as much from there. But yeah, I like Kubiak. I've liked him for a while. I watched a ton of Seahawks tape this year. I I like the Shanahan tree. I want a piece of that Shanahan tree in Buffalo. It's part of why I wanted Mike McDaniel as the Bills OC. So yeah. This next one, Chris Shula, defensive coordinator, Los Angeles Rams. I want to say this. I do think Kubiak is my. Oh, hold on. We got another super chat. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the super chat. In the comments says Philip Rivers, just saying, appreciate you. I appreciate you. You want Philip Rivers as like head coach? I kind of don't hate it. He's so fiery. And he knows he's a people leader. He's got like 75 kids and he knows how to right the ship there. That's funny. I don't know how serious you are now with it, but that's kind of funny. I like that. Chris Shula. I want to say this. As far as an individual and not thinking of whoever else comes with him, granted, like maybe Klint Kubiak brings, again, the defensive coordinator from Seattle, whose name I butcher all the time. Maybe he brings him. Justin saying the Bills can't hire a Shula. Yeah, it's in the league bylaws. That's fair. Yeah, Chris Shula is the grandson of legendary Dolphins head coach Shula. So, fair enough there. That's funny. So who knows who Kubiak brings with him as his defensive coordinator. Maybe he likes Babich and he keeps him. But I would assume he would bring Seattle Seahawks defensive staff with him, which is cool because you get some of that McDonald tree potentially in your building, in your defense, which would be awesome. Although McDonald is really the straw that stirs the drink and a lot of the horses that they have. But we would see who Kubiak would bring in. What I really like about Chris Shula, and I like some things about him individually, but part of what my perfect storm is with Chris Shula is if he were, so he's the defensive coordinator for the Rams. If he were to come in and be your head coach, my hope and pairing, and this is like my 1B to Kubiak being the 1A, especially now that Salah's off the board. If Shula came in as the head coach and then, it's pronounced dirty. Okay, so that is the last name pronunciation for the Seahawks defensive coordinator. I've heard it multiple times, and I never know what source to trust. Even like some team-based interviews will kind of get it wrong initially, and then I'm like, how do I want to go around? So thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. And also, I'm going to put my faith in you and trust that you're right, because as far as I know, you could be completely making it up, and you might be wrong yourself, but I'm going to trust you, and I appreciate you. So maybe Kubiak brings Dirty in with him, the defensive coordinator from Seattle, but my thought with the Rams is Chris Shula comes in, right? Defensive coordinator from the Rams. He's your head coach. Then offensive coordinator, I'm hoping would be Nate Scheelhaase, who is the passing game coordinator for the Rams right now. McVay, student, tree, disciple, doing all the drawings and mock-ups and everything that Liam Cohen was doing a couple years ago and all that stuff. I've mentioned Scheelhaase's name for a while. It got actually mentioned, got first brought up in the chat. I forget who, and if whoever's watching it, if you're here and you were that person, let me know. I might recognize the handle. Somebody brought up Scheelhaase back in like October or November here on the show when I was talking about Kubiak. And I remembered him at Ohio State, and I forgot that he was the pass game coordinator with the Rams and with McVay. So he's not a full OC, and I think that makes a lot of logistical sense. Like, it would be cool, but I also think it's realistic. Like, Shula comes over. He's probably going to bring somebody from that Rams staff. I don't think he's going to take Mike LaFleur, who's the current offensive coordinator with the Rams, right? You would take somebody else. So you would take like the quarterback's coach or the wide receivers coach or the passing game coordinator, who is Scheelhaase. That would be pretty sweet. So I would take Chris Shula as the head coach. He runs the defensive side, and then Nate Scheelhaase is your offensive coordinator, who I really like. That goes back to his Iowa State days, which is when I really remembered him. And then once I realized he was at the Rams these past couple of years, I was like, oh my God, I like it even more. Now, again, what we talked about a couple minutes ago, this means in theory, right? Like, because Scheelhaase also got interviewed by the Ravens for a head coaching position last week. And again, he's just a passing game coordinator with the Rams. So that shows you what kind of how he's thought about in the league circles, that he's a passing game coordinator. A couple of years ago was the Iowa State offensive coordinator. And now he's sitting there kind of getting head coaching interview spots as a 35-year-old. Again, even just going back through. So at Iowa State, starting in 2018, running backs coach, wide receivers coach, running game coordinator / running backs and wide receivers coach. Then in 2023, he was the OC and the QB coach. Then 2024, he goes to the Rams, offensive assistant and pass game specialist. Then this past year, he's been the pass game coordinator for the Rams. That just shows you how highly thought of he is, that he doesn't necessarily have this stocked out resume, and he got a head coaching interview. He is the type of guy who I think like he could come with Shula if that's the move that happens, right? And then Scheelhaase might be gone in 2027 or maybe even 2028 at the latest. And again, I think that's highly likely for that specific scenario, but also I think it's something you're going to have to deal with if you go with a defensive head coach. You're going to have that churn at offensive coordinator where Josh Allen and the offense does its thing. And so every year or two, teams are coming around and kicking the tires on your offensive coordinator to get head coaching interview opportunities. I mean, look at Joe Brady. Joe Brady has interviewed with the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Raiders. I think I've lost count of like all the names I've seen him associated with. Like Joe Brady's gotten a ton of interviews when a lot of Bills fans think he's terrible, but because of the association with this offense, and again, I don't think he's as terrible as everybody makes him out to be. I also don't think he's as great as some people have made him out to be, but that kind of relationship and association with Allen in this offense is going to get your offensive coordinator interviews. So you're going to run into that with anybody that is a defensive-based head coach. When it comes to Shula, individually, a lot of movement defensively, 5 down, overload looks, simulated pressures, creepers, a lot of run stunts, a lot of stunts in the pass, some Fangio match coverage principle stuff. I talked about this with Cody Alexander a couple weeks ago when I had him on the show. You get some Fangio coverage stuff on the back end, but then you've got some of that Wade Phillips 5 down pressure path and blitz package stuff up front. Really cool. Obviously, he has a bunch of horses at the Rams, especially up front. You've got Kobe Turner, you've got Byron Young, you've got Jared Verse. Now you've got Poona Ford now. You have Braden Fisk. You got dudes who can kind of roll. Even what's his face? Not Jordan Davis. From Clemson. This is gonna drive me nuts. I have to look up the Rams depth chart. Forgive me because his name is eluding me and it's gonna drive me absolutely insane. Tyler Davis, thank you. Defensive tackle. He's number 90 for the Rams. I remember liking him a bit coming out of Clemson. Like he's been productive. Like they have dudes up front who can absolutely just go. Even Josiah Stewart, rookie edge out of Michigan, who I like. He's undersized, but just plays like a velociraptor. Like you've seen what they've kind of been able to get out of guys up front. But again, he's got the horses. But I think he does a great job weaponizing them and setting them up for success, and kind of the hybrid nature of the defense I think is cool. My biggest question with him is, can he be as effective without having those dudes, right? How effective can he be without having Byron Young and Jared Verse and Kobe Turner and like this legitimate 5 or 6 man deep front that they have? And especially for a guy that runs a defense that's a combination of like multiple schemes and philosophies and has a hybrid nature to it, the personnel is super important. And that's what I also think is tough with whoever comes in for the defense, but especially if they come in and they're not a like for like scheme fit with what the Bills already do. Like, unless you're running a 4 down over front type of defense, it's going to be tough for you to change things here in Buffalo because 1, that's how the defense is built right now. 2, like someone alluded to earlier, they don't have the plethora of picks and cap space to kind of revamp everything in an offseason. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to come in, I'm going to remake this defense in my image, you don't really have the draft capital or the financial capital to do that. But so that's a hindrance for him and a hindrance for the next name that I'm going to bring up as well. But I like what he's done schematically. I like the hybrid nature of the defense and the combinations of what he does. I like how he's weaponized his players, sets them up for success. I like the quarters principles that he operates with on the back end. I'm a huge match coverage guy, so I like that type of stuff. I like the 3 safeties that he's doing, how he works in Cam Curl, Cam Kitchens, and Quentin Lake when he's healthy. Him being able to get Emmanuel Forbes and Kobe Durant to play outstanding at times, even though they had a bit of a lull. What he's gotten out of the linebacker spot, even though they don't have studs at that spot. I know like Nate Landman has been like a fun guy who's really kind of come on, but it's been Nate Landman and Omar Spates. Like none of those guys are big names that run the show or all pro type of guys. And he's been able to kind of just set them up for success a lot with what he does at the front, and he has the horses. But yeah, so for me, the cons with him are, can he be as effective without having those dudes? And then, him bringing his scheme and philosophy in, knowing that it's not really a like for like fit with how the Bills are currently built from a roster and body type standpoint and previous schematics, I think that would be tough. And again, what offensive coordinator would he bring? I think that's a huge piece for me. Again, my hope is it would be Scheelhaase, but we'll go in a different direction if needed. And any defensive coordinator, this isn't necessarily a con just for Shula, but again, any defensive coordinator as your head coach means you're probably playing the revolving door at offensive coordinator every couple of years. But I do like Shula. I do like what a lot of the Rams have been doing, or what a lot of the Rams have been doing. What the Rams have been doing this year in a lot of ways. Again, the Rams are a team that I've lost track at this point. I watched a ton of their tape last year because I liked Kobe Turner a lot, and then rookie Jared Verse. I like Cam Kinchins, Byron Young. Again, their front was so sick. And then I liked Michael Hoyt last year too. But they were doing such cool stuff schematically last year. And him being the DC last year, his first year as their DC last year, then being their defensive coordinator again this year. I just think they're well coached. They attack the movement, what they are from an identity and philosophical standpoint, and then also how he's been able to kind of blend multiple schemes on the front and back end. I like it. And then his coaching history, in case you care, he's been with the Rams since 2017. He was the assistant linebackers coach for 2 years, the outside linebackers coach for 2 years, the linebackers coach in 2021, the pass game coordinator and DBs coach in 2022, then the pass rush coordinator and linebackers coach in 2023, and then the defensive coordinator last year and this year. And knowing what they've been able to churn out there with the Rams, maybe he can help coach up this front a little bit, ID some better pass rush prospects, develop some guys a little bit more, and or set some guys up for success. We'll see. But yeah, I like Shula as a name as well. Next name, also a defensive mind, Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator, Chargers. Another one who, again, the schematic fit, kind of leading off with a con here, but kind of, connecting it to the Shula piece. The schematic fit with how the Bills roster is built defensively, I think is a question. Minter is more of a 3-4 type of guy, odd front type of looks, but he does know how to have like odd front structure in his run defense, but kind of tie it into an even front with his principles of kind of just gap and a half, but attack, react, and or I should say react, attack, like knockback type of deal, reset the line of scrimmage. I do think he could kind of blend things a bit, but he's another guy who, like, the structure and the scheme isn't necessarily the ideal fit, but I just value him so much as a defensive mind. If you ever want to take a peek on him, there's a ton of stuff going back to his time at Michigan. So he was the Michigan defensive coordinator under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan for a little bit. We'll kind of run down his time there. So he was with the Ravens in 2017. He was a defensive assistant for 2 years. Then he was the assistant DBs coach in 2019, the full-on DBs coach in 2020. Then he went to Vanderbilt in 2021, where he was the DC and safeties coach. Then he was at Michigan in 2022 and 2023, where he was their defensive coordinator, won a national championship there. And then he has been the Los Angeles Chargers defensive coordinator last year and this year, where he followed Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers from Michigan. If you ever want to look something up on him, just type his name, Jesse Minter, and type in the 4 pillars of defense. There's coaching clinics on him. There's interviews of him talking about it. His 4 pillars of defense, I should say, are effort and angles. That's one, effort and angles, block deconstruction, ball disruption, and obnoxious communication. You just see the way his team operates. Again, like playing the angles of football. Football often comes down to math a bunch. It's numbers and just pure plus and minus. And then it's also angles, it's geometry, all that kind of stuff. And he coaches guys to hustle up. He coaches them to take good angles of the football. Block deconstruction, hugely important. And if you've watched the Chargers, you don't use their linebackers as an example. You see Deion Henley and Denzel Perryman. Those dudes know how to deconstruct blocks all day. But then watching, Khalil Mack, watching Tui Tuipulotu, even Derwin James, like watch their DBs, how they take on blocks. You see that ball disruption, making plays on the ball, causing havoc, and then obnoxious communication. They do a lot of cool schematic stuff on the back end, and that happens because of how well and tight how good and tight their communication is on the back end. He's also, again, a lot of just great one-liners from him and what he believes philosophically and from an identity standpoint. He talks all the time about how scheme is important, but also it's what you play. It's not just what you play, it's how you play it. He says, quote, it's a 50-50 split. How you play and what you play are of equal importance. And I just think that's so important. Like, he's that type of guy that he knows what he wants to play, but he's only going to play what his guys can maximize, what sets them up for success. Because it's not just what you play, it's how you play it. And him being able to balance those two, he's done it for the past several years. I like it. Again, schematically creative on the back end. One of the things I don't like, and this kind of ties into what the Bills used to be a bit, he is a proponent, especially this past year, of like that light box defense that will give up, yards on the ground, but won't allow a ton of explosives. He is kind of the proverbial like bend but don't break type of defense. In 2025, that's really what they were, not blitzing a ton, but getting really good rush efficiency. I think they had the 7th highest sack rate in the league that in this past year with what they're able to do. They want to make offenses grow impatient. They're going to stay in nickel. They're going to have light boxes. They're going to let you run the ball for 4 to 5 yards at a time. And they're eventually going to bet that you become impatient or you make a mistake. And then they capitalize because they're in dime or they're in nickel. And again, some of this was tied to, you got Derwin James, who's a skeleton key of a nickel with what he can do with coverage and what he can do as a run defender. And then some of the DBs they've had on the back end as well. But that's something that for me is a con. Like, I don't like that type of model and mentality, but it really works for what he's done and where he's been and how he built this Chargers team and who they've had from a personnel standpoint. I also wonder again how, yes, Force of Sleep says, bend but don't break is forbidden in Buffalo. I also wonder how that gels kind of just with the front that they have in Buffalo. Like, you go to the Chargers and they had, Poona Ford last year. They had Tierra Tart this year. Like, they're playing some odd front principles and, what gaps they're controlling, how they're controlling them, playing gap and a half, playing knockback, all that type of stuff. That's not what the Bills have been built with, and that's not what the Bills have. Like, they would have to kind of retool themselves a little bit. Like, TJ Sanders isn't built for that type of defense. Ed Oliver isn't built for that type of defense. Deion Walker maybe is built for that type of defense, but you have to severely change your interior defensive line. Your linebackers are not good at block deconstruction. We'll see what happens with Matt Milano if he comes back. But Terrell Bernard, he's not built for block deconstruction. His size and frame and arm length, not great. So what would Minter have to do to kind of combat that? I think that's what makes the fit a little tough. But I do like him as a defensive mind. I think he's someone who would get the job done in the long term going forward. But I think the initial first year, like that first year, 2026, I think would be really ugly and messy defensively because they don't have the pieces or the body types that would fit the type of defense he runs. But I do trust him to kind of balance that a little bit and mitigate those discrepancies. He's a really great teacher, very hands-on. But I think it would be tough considering just how the Bills' defensive roster is built. Similar challenge for Shula as well. Both of these guys, right? Both of like the hot name defensive coordinators in Shula and Minter that are potential head coach candidates don't really gel or fit with what the Bills' current identity is defensively. And you would have to overhaul or retool or revamp or tweak, whatever verbiage you want to use, a lot of the body types in the roster to get them to fit the schematics and identity and philosophy for Shula and Minter. That's part of the reason why I also like Robert Saleh, because I thought it was more of a seamless fit, and I do think he's a good coach. I know some people don't. But yeah, I do think that's going to be a challenge for Minter, just like it would be for Shula. But I value both of their minds schematically and kind of going from there. Next ones, I'm going to bring these guys up in conjunction with one another. A lot of you have been mentioning in the chat. Joe Brady, Brian Daboll. I don't know why. I've kind of backed off this a little bit the more I've thought about it, but I just have a gut feeling that Joe Brady is going to be the head coach of the Bills. I just kind of think of that. I don't want Joe Brady as the head coach of the Bills. I don't think he's as big of a problem and he's been kind of made out to be. I just don't think I don't think Joe Brady, I'm going to say, just kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth. Actually, no, I'm not. I don't think Joe Brady was as amazing as everybody was making him out to be last year when Allen won the MVP and the Bills were running the ball and doing all that great stuff. I also don't think he's as bad as everybody's been making him out to be this year. So I don't think he was as high up there as everybody was making him out to be, and I don't think he's as bad as everybody's making him out to be now. That said, I don't want him to be head coach. And I'm in a similar boat with Brian Daboll, really just because of how poorly things went with the Giants and the reports coming out of thereafter. Granted, could be a smear campaign and all that type of stuff. We don't know what the deal is with that organization and how things come out, but things were just so bad in New York. And I even going back to this past game with the Chiefs, or this past season where they played the Chiefs on Monday night. And I know Spags does his things and will try and limit, your best thing. But Daboll not being able to get the ball to Malik Neighbors, watching Daniel Jones leave the Giants and then start to kind of flourish legitimately a little bit with the Colts, how sustainable that was going to be before or after the injury. Now there's a huge variable thrown into that. I don't want Brady or Daboll. It's just, I didn't even dive into that. We know kind of who they are and what they are at this point as well. So I didn't dive into too much of the schematics for this conversation because I think a lot of us know who they are and what they are after watching the Bills for all these years. But Daboll's run in New York was just so bad. And there was so much like smoke from a negative standpoint that even if a good chunk of it is still smoke and there's no fire, there's still enough fire that makes me not want Daboll to be the head coach of the Bills. Which is a shame because I met him in person at the Senior Bowl. He was awesome. He's a local guy, all that kind of stuff. I don't want Daboll. And as Tristan says, like Daboll doesn't seem to have the disposition of a head coach. Yeah, there's just a lot of wonkiness with Daboll. And so I don't want Daboll. And I don't want Joe Brady. I don't think Brady is the guy I want steering the ship. And, comment from Will in the chat, Daboll is a classic Belichick tree coach. That's actually super fair. That's a super fair thought there. Yeah, and then Brady, I feel like also, too, like if Brady's the head coach, he's more puppet than anything else, and I don't value him enough schematically to think that that's fine from an X's and O's standpoint. Like, I think Kubiak would be better, and I would prefer that. I don't think there's a right answer for anybody. Like we've talked about it, right? Like even the guys that I've listed off, like my top three of Kubiak, Shula, and Minter, we still don't know on them as like head coaches. Like there's variables to each guy. There's pros and cons to each guy across the board. I just don't want Brady and I don't want Daboll. And it's more gut feel than anything, although there are schematic pieces and people leading aspects to it. But Daboll's tenure in New York was ugly and wonky and blah. Just what he was doing with Jackson Dart at the end and running him a million times, like the Cam Scatterboo stuff, just, Malik Neighbors, like kind of throwing jabs at him last year and, people openly in the media, like players criticizing him and just not liking him. And then how he went out the door, just really messy and muddy. And then even kind of compare that, somebody said in the chat, yeah, like how his tenure in Buffalo ended was also not great. And then like rumblings that kind of came after that. So I'm out on Daboll, not a fan of that one. And Brady, again, I don't think Brady's as terrible. I don't want Joe Brady as my head coach right now. And I could be completely wrong. He might go to, someone said he's in the final stages with Baltimore. He interviewed with Miami, interviewed with the Raiders, I believe. He could go on to be an amazing head coach. I just don't see it right now, and I don't have the faith in it right now. And I just don't. I don't want more of, even though, again, the offense, I think, and we'll get this into the film room tomorrow, and I don't want to talk too much about the Broncos game, but I don't think the offense was a huge problem schematically or from a play calling or design standpoint in the playoffs. There were some good things that he was doing, just like I think there were some good things throughout. But, question from Josh. And in their tenure in Buffalo, whose offense looked better, Brady or Daboll? It's tough because they're both so different. Brady is condensed formations, bigger body types at wide receiver and running the football. And Daboll is John Brown and Cole Beasley, spread them out, 3x2, empty gun. Allen's going to throw it 40 times a game. They're two completely different offenses. And they both were a sign of the times. Like Daboll's offense worked because of where the NFL was and its trends and its meta. And Brady's offense has worked because of where the NFL is and its trends and its meta. Ooh. I also think, RJ says that's not even a question. Daboll all the way. Everything was difficult under Brady because the other team knew the plays. I also think people forget about like the sludge of games for Daboll, like the Jacksonville game, ironically. Even the 13 seconds game, the Bills started out horrible on offense. To start, like they had that flurry where they started chucking it down the field and making plays, but they kind of had to because they started out slow and muddy and ugly. And they had a couple games like that in the Daboll tenure. Wow. But the pass game stuff has been really. I want to say Brady, but the pass game stuff has been so ugly under Brady. But the weapons and the players available also haven't been great with Brady. But then also, like, he also didn't do good with Diggs. And as we clearly see, Diggs has not completely fallen off. I think you could do 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The run game under Daboll wasn't great, and he didn't really hit that enough. Oh, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's really tough because their offenses are just so different. The Brady run game has been good. Granted, he's had Cromer, so you can see that as a pro, as or a con. Oh, and Jason just said, I don't trust that Brady would succeed without Cromer. It's tough. There's so many variables. I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm going to say push. That's a great question. That's a really great question, Josh. Really well done. That's a good question. I'm going to be thinking about that all night. Obviously the Daboll pass game, lights out for the most part, even though, again, they had a bunch of struggles and didn't pivot to the run game enough. And then the Brady run game was sick, and then the pass game struggled. If you could merge the two, that'd be sick at some point. And again, personnel ties into it too. Like Daboll didn't have a running back that capable like James Cook. He also didn't have Aaron Cromer. Joe Brady doesn't have prime John Brown and prime Cole Beasley. Prime Cole Beasley was a problem. Dude was a monster. So having those guys, maybe that helps a little bit. Plus like prime Diggs. Cam Morey says, let's just take the middle ground and say Ken Dorsey. I still don't think Ken Dorsey was as bad as everybody made him out to be. That's a conversation for another time. Oh, also fair comment here. Saying you also have a younger, less experienced Josh Allen under Brian Daboll. Fair. Yeah, and based on the comments here, I think there's a pretty good split. Yeah, I think you could make the case either way. That's a really good question, Josh. Well done in getting everybody chatting. Well done. I don't think Brady is terrible. If you told me Joe Brady was staying as offensive coordinator, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't have hated it, if McDermott stayed as well. Like I wanted Mike McDaniel over Joe Brady, but I don't think Joe Brady's a guy that I'm like, he's terrible, jettison him into the sun. If he left, similar to McDermott, if he left, I'd be like, okay, cool. If he stayed, I'd be like, okay, cool. But I don't want him as a head coach. And then Daboll, how bad that Giants stop was and everything coming out and what they were on the field, ugly and bad in a lot of ways. Some other other names that I'm kind of just thinking of. I was just diving into like other playoff teams and who could potentially go somewhere. Grant Udinsky, he is the offensive coordinator for the Jags. Really kind of both Jags coordinators potentially, him and then Anthony Campanile, the defensive coordinator who we talked about a ton a couple weeks ago. But I think those are more like outline names, especially for Udinsky, who he's 30 years old. Would be extremely young head coach. He's been the Jags OC this past year, but we know how involved Cohen is and, just kind of what he is. But those are some names I've heard some rumblings about potentially happening, but I kind of could see it happening, but I don't think either are completely realistic. And then as the comment just mentioned here, Davis Webb, another name. For those who don't know, he's the Broncos quarterbacks coach. And again, he's also somebody who young as well. He's 30 years old, finished playing for the Giants in 2022. He became the Broncos QB coach in 2023 and was at that through 2024. And then this past season, he's been the Broncos offensive pass game coordinator and QB coach, obviously learning at the feet of Sean Payton. Really good offensive mind, really good red zone designer. I'm not completely opposed to Davis Webb. I just think he's so raw. Davis Webb is like one of those, like, say he got a head coaching job now. It's either one of those moves where, like, in 2 seasons or maybe even 1, you're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe somebody hired him with his lack of experience." Like, that's absolutely crazy. Although, again, his playing history was more off the field than it was on the field. But I think he's one of those hires, if it were to happen, or names where, it's like, wow, what a crazy hit. That's amazing. Or if it's like, wow, I can't believe somebody hired that guy. He has no experience. What a dumpster fire that was. That type of deal. Um, yeah, I throw him in. I throw him in that category there of just kind of seeing like um type of deal. Those are some last other names. So yeah, my top three are. Sorry, I was reading comments as I'm kind of thinking and talking here a little bit, waxing poetically. My top three: Klint Kubiak, Chris Shula, Jesse Minter. For what it's worth, I had Robert Saleh as my number 2 a day ago, but then he got snatched up by the Titans. Gage says, "What about the Notre Dame coach, Marcus Freeman?" I just don't think he's leaving Notre Dame. I just don't think it's happening. I don't think it's happening. Jay Clark says, after watching a few interviews, Webb has that aura, and that counts for something. I don't think, sure. If we're going to aura farm for it, why not? I just don't know enough of what he offers as like a showrunner and ship steerer and all of that and everything else in between, X's, O, schematics, the people management piece. There's a lot. So I don't know. I don't know. Would Peyton Manning ever coach? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think he wants to. There's a lot of this. Coaching's tough, man. You're in the building like 18 hours a day. You're like sleeping under your desk. It's a grind. Like it's a real grind. Yeah, it's a real grind. You know, it's not a grind. Getting the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Love that segue. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese, a catering division called Elevated Catering of Buffalo. Amazing, amazing, amazing food. However you slice it, no pun intended there. I truly do believe One Pie Pizza is the best pizza in Buffalo, and I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they are the best pizza in Buffalo. I had reached out to another pizza spot for a potential sponsor. One Pie saw that, asked me to come on down. They gave me a pie to sample and try, and I have never looked back. Caleb says, did they deliver to Houston? I wish they did. I'll ask. But yeah, I really do think they are the best in Buffalo. And I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they're the best. I tried their stuff. I've never looked back. I like the way they just go about their business and all the generosity to the city and the community at large. Partnering with Roswell, partnering with the SPCA, Toys for Tots, the Alzheimer's Foundation. They give back in a lot of ways that they don't necessarily have to. I always describe them as really good people making really good food. They make an awesome breakfast pizza. So if you're sad, come Sunday morning because the Bills aren't playing, get yourself some One Pie Pizza, breakfast pizza, or just wait till the afternoon and get a regular pie. If you get different toppings and veggies, they'll chop them all up evenly and sprinkle them across the pie. And again, that homemade blue cheese is absolutely immaculate. And the catering division is great too. So if you are putting on an event, you put it in, that little bee in your bonnet now. If you're doing events for the summer or grad parties or birthdays or different things, put One Pie out there and call up their catering division, Elevated Catering of Buffalo. I've had them do multiple events for me each of the past summers, different family events and functions and gatherings and all that kind of stuff. And it's hit every single time. And you can get the pizza while you're doing it too. So you can get like awesome chicken and rice dishes and different kinds of mac and cheeses and also still get the pizzas on top of it. Awesome, awesome stuff. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza if you have not already. You will not be disappointed when you go there. Tell them Disguise Coverage or me or Cover One sent you, and treat your taste buds and do some good while you are at it. I'm falling apart. This episode was awesome, even though it was sad and frustrating. Again, if I didn't get to a comment of yours or a thought of yours or anything, I sincerely, honestly, apologize. There were so many comments in this episode. I didn't know if there would be a lot of people tuning in tonight or not. But there were a ton of people here, and that was awesome to see. So thank you to everybody who tuned in live. I really appreciate it. Before you leave, please drop a like on this video. Again, likes are the lifeblood of these streams. So please drop a like on this video. If you have
not already. I appreciate everybody stopping by, watching live, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's man, it's an interesting time for the Bills. I already thought this was going to be a very pivotal and forming offseason for the direction of the franchise before McDermott got fired, just with where they are with some of the cap, where they are with some of the players they brought in, the draft picks they've made. I kind of thought the defense was kind of going to have to cross the Rubicon a little bit with what they've been from a body type and archetype standpoint. As you folks know, I've been talking about that so much last year and a ton this season. So I thought they had to make a lot of defensive changes to get to where they need to be with the league trends and the league meta, but they don't have a lot of cap space and financial flexibility to do that. Draft picks, we'll kind of see. Extensions they've given out, all this stuff. I already thought there was going to be kind of a tough offseason and a big one for them. And now with McDermott gone, it's even more so. We're really now, and I don't think this is anything revelatory that I'm about to say, but we're going to point to this offseason as such a pivotal moment in the direction of this franchise. It's either going to be they right the ship and things get better and they finally get over the hump, or they stay the same and it's like, oh, it wasn't McDermott, it wasn't the coaches, or they tank and they plummet. Like, again, nothing I'm saying is revelatory or some brand new information, but this one's going to go a long way. Allen is getting into his 30s. That their cap hit is only getting higher. They do have to retool. They do have to right the ship like a true admiral. K. Amori, well done. It's going to be, it's just going to be a very pivotal and formative offseason for what they do. How much roster turnover is there? What coaching changes are there? Are we looking at, a new head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator? Whoever they bring in, I think, again, a lot of the names that I mentioned, if they bring in Shula, he's also the defensive coordinator. There will be a defensive coordinator, but he's running the defense. If they bring in Klint Kubiak, they'll have an offensive coordinator, but he's running the offense. But does Chris Shula come in and Joe Brady stays? Right? Does Jesse Minter come in and Joe Brady stays? Does Klint Kubiak come in and Bobby Babich stays? What defenses get brought in player-wise, schematically? What offenses get brought in player-wise, schematically? The changes. How hard does Beane go to try and show that it was McDermott? Does he have some tricks up his sleeve that he's going to make, or kind of try and go scorched earth to prove, hey, it was McDermott, I'm going to really shine now? And does that work? Or does he fail further and it plunges this team into the depths of hell from which they never recover? Scary, but potentially exciting. I'm going to start to dive into college tape soon, which is always a fun thing for me. You've got free agent evaluations coming up, college prospect evaluations coming up. Next week's episode, I will likely, I love all the Admiral jokes everybody's putting in the chat. It's awesome. Next week, I'm probably going to do a deep dive end of season recap type of deal in terms of positions, archetypes, things they need to change, things they need to do, kind of lumping that in with the free agent class, money, cap space. We'll be diving into all of that on this show, right? Like cap moves that can be made, extensions that could or should be made, guys who can be cut, post June 1st designations, all that stuff. I'll be outlining the whole offseason schedule as we go forward in this week. The McDermott firing and changes just kind of threw all of that into flux. I hope you continue to join me every single week live Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern here on the Cover One channel for Disguise coverage. We're going to be diving into everything schematic, X's and O's based, structure, player evaluations, fits, anything and everything. We're going to be doing a ton of deep dive in this offseason. I'm going to be doing another big deep dive film series like I did a couple seasons ago when I kind of forecasted and predicted what the Bills would be offensively with condensed formations and league trends. And, Mac Hollins came in and why they brought Coleman and what it was going to mean and all of that. And we showed tape of the Rams and the Lions and the Texans offense at the time as some examples of what teams are doing with condensed formations to win. We're going to be doing that on the defensive side of the ball this offseason to show the direction the Bills defense needs to go in and why, based on current league trends and meta and all that stuff. I hope you folks enjoyed this episode. Don't get too down on whatever's going on. And if you have a question, thought, comment, concern, anything or everything you need, get at me on Twitter. Again, pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Get at me on Blue Sky if you're there at proant. No underscore there, just PROANT. I post equally on both of those platforms. Get at me in the Cover One Discord. DMing me is the best way to get a hold of me there. Feel free to leave a comment here on YouTube in the actual, not the live chat, but the actual comments on the show. I'll answer those as well. And yeah, I appreciate all you folks. Thank you very much for the kind words that have been coming through for myself and the show. I see them and I appreciate them and they mean a lot. Thank you again to Brian for your super chat, to I'm guessing it's Magneto or MG Neto. I liked it for your super chat as well. And again, thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. The live chat was awesome. These episodes are always great. It's tough at both because I feel like I can't get to everything I want to speak to in my notes, but I need to. But I also feel like I just want to sit here and read through everybody's stuff in the chat and have an engaging back to back or back and forth with everybody in the chat. So the chat was awesome tonight. The engagement with each other, the engagement with myself, the back and forth, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, all of that. I hope you folks had a great episode. Again, if you're watching live now or watching post live later, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. I know it's corny to ask for that or shell out for that, but likes are the lifeblood of these streams, and they go a sincerely long way to help myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you're watching on YouTube, please drop a like on this video. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Those are hugely important as well for algorithms and tracking and trends and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, if you enjoyed this episode or the show or me, tell your family and friends and loved ones about it. If you hated this episode or show or me, tell your enemies and make them watch or listen to this and try and ruin their day. We'll strap in for that 10 a.m. presser tomorrow and kind of see what happens. I'll be tweeting about it and posting about it and going from there. And we'll see what it means for the future of this team from a head coaching standpoint, from a coordinator standpoint, from a roster construction standpoint. Lot to happen. And, if you're excited to kind of dive into potential free agents and see the tape and the metrics, college football prospect evaluations, see the tape and the metrics, I am the person for you on social or here, whatever you got. Again, thank you for all the kind words for everybody in the chat. I appreciate you folks sincerely more than you know. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you when I see you. And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Again, I apologize for not being able to get to every single comment because there was just crazy amount in this episode. So get at me on one of the multiple platforms or avenues that I outlined earlier. And I will see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.